As world leaders meet to the climate summit, a parallel discussion was taking place in Cairo between deans of African business schools. Their talks focus on how business education across the continent can adapt to the changing environment and help with the transition to a greener economy. Earlier I spoke to Professor Jon Foster-Pedley from the Henley Business School Afrika on the importance of such discussions.
Corporates and business people are instrumental in climate change. They work within a system, and what happens is they try and make profit, and they try and pay off their shareholders, but often there's a damage on the environment, or they're not lifting people out of poverty. They're not building prosperity. And the theory of this is everyone acts in a free market, and if the system is perfect, then everybody will be lifted by the rising tide. But because the institutions aren't right, what happens is that rising tide drowns people. It drowns the poor people who cannot escape. It drowns many people who don't have the wherewithal to change their lives because it's an imperfect system. So what we now need to do is manage business in a way that doesn't create too much damage on the environment, containable damage, that is, at least we can manage that, and also lift people out of poverty, out of difficulty, out of exclusion, so that they can become economically active and they can lift their lives, use their intelligence to good purpose. That way we'll build a thriving society. Now, businesses are absolutely doing their best. They're trying to, many of them, some of them aren't, of course, trying to adjust and adapt to this. But we have to understand that this is it's a lot more fundamental than that. We have to change the way we drive, the way we travel, the way we think about profits, who we bring on board. And we have to understand that we want a world that is not short of species or covered in pollution and plastic, where we can actually create societies that can, through their intelligent use of new technologies and some changes of habit, can create a world that is sustainable, more disciplined, yes, but more interesting in many ways to live in, and that produces a prosperous environment for the majority of people. And of course, that becomes a political argument and it becomes a social argument. We cannot continue with the highest Gini coefficient in the world, which is what South Africa has. More people locked in poverty proportionally than any other country in the world.
Now, Professor, I learned something the other day where somebody said to me, don't get in the way of a man and his paycheck or a man and his meal. Now, the things that you speak to are around businesses globally that are making billions of profit every year. And in many ways, what you're trying to do, or what the world is trying to do, is to get these businesses to cut a significant chunk of their profits by shifting how they do business. Now, just a few days ago, I learned that France has banned short-haul flights. So if you can travel to a city or travel to a destination within a 2.5-hour period, then you'll go by train. What sort of acceptance levels do you envision us getting when you start putting all this information across to the people in business that basically make the decisions?
Well, you see, businesses in rich countries, I mean, this is arguable, can adapt reasonably well in some ways to these changes. They can invest in technologies, they can change the way they use energy, they can decarbonize, they can protect themselves. But what happens is that the people who are going to suffer most from climate change are not in the rich countries, they're in Africa. They're the majority of the people who are in less developed countries, because their lifestyle, which is already fragile, will be damaged and changed beyond understanding. And so you think about get between somebody and their paycheck or their meal. Well, that's what's going to happen. People are not going to be able to use agriculture in the same way. They're not being able to get the same revenue they can. Businesses are going to have to relocate and change. It's going to be more expensive to manage them. And the volatility will increase, and the social volatility will as well. So for businesses in the developing world, we've got to adjust our way to bringing more people on board. We also have to fight back against this unjust transition of why should the developed countries have used a lot of carbon to get where they are, and now we're trying to lift ourselves. Why shouldn't we use coal or gas? And there are arguments either way, but ultimately, if we all keep using coal and gas, we're going to keep pumping carbon into an atmosphere that is already oversaturated, and we will all struggle. So what we have to do now is think about how can we get investment into developing countries, into new technologies. How can we also get developed countries to reduce their carbon use? How can we get them to think differently about what business and who business is for? It should be for the broad stakeholders in society. You shouldn't be making money by damaging the environment, which somebody else has to pay for. You should actually have to account for those costs in your business, and that's not what's happening. So the changes are quite fundamental. But unless we do this, we're not going to have a world that's going to be very interesting to live in. And of course, we will have technological answers, but we simply can't carry on consuming and digging things out of the ground and burning them like we have done for centuries. We've got to a point and a mass of humanity on this planet where we can't. There's so much good literature out there now and so many denialists as well, but it's absolutely understood that 95, 96% of the really capable scientists in this world agree that these changes are man-made. When we talk about climate change, we're really talking about climate breakdown. And so if we want to avoid this, higher education institutions have to not just do performative small actions, a little course here or there, but really engage with the people who know a lot about this in our countries and internationally, and start to reinvent syllabi so that everybody understands the consequences of what they do on society, and they build businesses which are more inclusive and actually can make fair profits, but not by damaging others.
Well, you raise an issue that I obviously was going to speak to, and that's around putting together the various syllabi to teach in the business schools. How long is that process going to take, and what does that process look like? Is it going to be full-time learning that is offered in the business schools? Is it going to be short courses, etc.? And how accessible is that information or literature going to be available to business leaders who may not necessarily have the time or the desire to come to or enroll in a business school?
Well, I think business schools and education has to change a lot. You can't come with these complex theories and deep science and big textbooks and expect busy business people to absorb them and take on board. We have to come the other way. We have to condense information, synthesize it into learnable bites, find new ways to express it. Simple enough for clever people is the Henley motto. We have to make it simple enough for clever people to absorb, use graphic information, and also show and give models about how the actual capitalism that we are in has to evolve. The form of capitalism we've had, based on Milton Friedman and those ideas for so many years, simply is not sustainable in a world that is having such damage now. So we've got to give people ways of doing it. How can we do it? Well, we do it with videos. We can do it with books and graphics. We can include these arguments and these opinions in every syllabus we do. I was at a conference now in Amsterdam and listening to universities around the world getting passionate about this. They're not going to do a side course. Every course will talk about, well, how can we carry on and do business, but make sure people are not damaged in the process and make sure our planet isn't. How can we build business that's going to create value? Because the reality is it's only those businesses in the end that are really going to be able to survive. And the other reality is there will be a massive backlash, a fight between the carbon producers or whoever they are, and the people who want to change that. Because it's very hard to change your model of economics as it is your life. We are locked into carbon. We have to unlock ourselves now and look at alternative energies. And the abilities are out there. So academia has to change, and typically it takes several years to develop and formulate a new academic course, particularly in South Africa. We've got to accelerate that. There are so many good international programs online available that will teach everyone all we need to know about these topics. And frankly, I think we all have a sort of obligation to learn now, because if we are intelligent and you care and you're looking at the world around you, well, frankly, this is a big issue. It's a real issue we can't run away from. So, hey, let's get with it and learn about it and see what we can do about it and make the next generation have a better future than they would if we didn't.